Our Father in heaven, thank you that we might know you through our Lord Jesus Christ in communion with the Holy Spirit. We thank you for this book that Linda has written. We thank you for her and her work. Thank you for Marty and his work. We appreciate being here together, not leaving out Tim. We thank you for Tim too. And he's with us. We ask your blessing in what we say, what we hear in your light. We would see Jesus here today. In Jesus' name, we pray it. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Yes. So Linda, just
Yes.
start us off a little bit about telling your life journey. How did you come to meet Christ, and how did you get interested in doing theological studies? And particularly T.F. Torrance, you have invested quite a bit in T.F. Torrance studies. It's obvious from your work. So just give us a bit of your life sketch.
Okay, I will try to keep it short and sweet. I tend to
Just
go
make
around.
sure it's about you. We don't care how short it is.
I go around in circles rather than straight to the point. So I'm just telling you ahead
Okay.
of time. But I was born and raised in Southern California to parents who had joined Radio Church of God. And I was raised in that church and worldwide. And I was raised on the campus in Pasadena pretty much because my father worked in the radio studio and recording the Armstrongs and so on. So I was immersed in that theology from the time I was a child. I went to Imperial schools for 8 years. So I have this kind of, it was all kind of ingrained in me for many years. When I turned 21, I had been baptized when I was 20, which was kind of interesting because I came to Christ when I was probably 13 or 14. I really had an experience where I began to work in a relationship with him. But of course, I wasn't allowed to do baptism or anything, any kind of commitment until I was an adult. So I just remember when I was about 20 years old, I had a friend ask me, why don't you get baptized? And I thought to myself, I probably should do that. And then I went and I did it. It was kind of one of those, it was interesting. But when I was 21, I went to Ambassador College. I felt if I wanted to go to college, I would go there. And after 4 years, I began to work for the publishing department there. I love print and I love writing and I love, that kind of stuff. I've always have. But I never felt that I could write. Or I had when I first went to university at Santa Barbara after high school, I had a writing teacher tell me I didn't know what I was doing. And I believed her. So, it's one of those things. But I had gone there, I'd flunked out of University of Santa Barbara, went to junior college, ended up at Ambassador for 4 years, 2 years in Texas, 2 years in California, worked for the publishing department. And then I met my husband, Ray, and he was an Iowa farmer. I met him in college in Texas. So we had known each other for years, but just God kind of brought us together again. So I married him in 88, moved to Iowa, and I was there for until 2002. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl. And then we had gone through an understanding of the change of grace, salvation by grace through faith. And God was gracious to me and just totally turned me around. We lived in a small rural community. And what was interesting is constantly God was putting me into relationship with people of other faiths. Baptist, it didn't matter what it was. I would either have to talk to them, work with them. We lived across the street from a Baptist minister and his wife, and she and I were on a community development group together. And we would have conversations about Easter and Christmas, and she would explain why they did what they did. And I discovered that I didn't know anything. That I didn't know why I did what I did, It was interesting. So God just kind of got me into a new place, to where I was like, oh wow, so there was that thirst for getting to know God for who he is, and what is the truth about this. And I've always loved theology. I mean, when I was in college, I would just sit there and get the concordance out, and I'd just be looking up words and looking up this, and that's just my thing. I've always loved it. And but I, of course, in our denomination, a woman could not be a minister, could not even conceive of such a thing. I had to be married and have kids, and have a home and whatever.
Wow.
Yeah.
When did that change?
It was around 2000, I think, the late 1990s, 8, 9, something like that, because it was I had been wrestling with for several years a feeling of being called to that kind of thing, to ministry or counseling or something in that direction. And in 2002, I was divorced from my husband due to some issues in our family, and just he needed to grow up, basically, and I did too. So let's just be honest, we both needed to grow up.
Funny how that happens.
Yeah. So we were trying to do marriage under the old covenant, and it doesn't work real well. So
does that mean legalistically? I mean, it was conditional. Is that?
Yes, and and also the dysfunction that comes with, like, I was raised by parents where the mother was the doormat, and the mother just did what she was told. She didn't make decisions on her own. She couldn't say no. And so I thought that's how you had a good marriage. And then he was, raised by an abusive father and very, well, he had a hot temper, let's just put it that way. But he never hit me. Well, once, but I told him, you'd ever do that again, I'm out of here. But he used his mouth, and because he knew how to do that. But it was just I had to draw a line and just say, okay, I need my kids to be safe. And so I did the hardest thing I ever had to do in my life, and I had to file for divorce. And so there's more to that story than that, but anyway,
and it was 20 years ago.
Yes. And now here's the rest of the story. So I began to work at a nursing home, and I worked at a care facility doing adult basic education. Then I worked at a nursing home to provide for my family as a single mom. And I began to attend a different congregation of worldwide, which was morphing into GCI. And during that time, they had me fast track to pastoral leadership. And they sent me to new pastors training. I came back, and my boss cut my hours in half. So I began. Well, I had a new boss who was friends with the boss who didn't like me, and they decided I was getting in the way of what they wanted done, and they got rid of me. Well, that was the thing. I came to work one day and I got fired. But after I was on unemployment, sending out these applications like you have to do when you're unemployed. And finally the denominational regional, or I guess it was a district pastor or whatever, said, I think you should apply for a job as a full-time pastor. So I was like, really? So,
And it
so
must have been wonderfully affirming though for you to
yes,
recognize that somebody saw that in you.
yeah. And my congregation was like, yeah, you need to do that. So I applied for this job in Nashville, and I went to work one day. I got fired. I got a call that night. Will you come and be our pastor? And I was like, whoa, okay, God, I guess that's where I'm going. That's where I need to
Yeah.
go. So that's how I ended up here. Then the journey kind of comes where my husband, he had been working as a paramedic specialist in a small town north of where I'd been living. And he lost his business. He went through some major changes. He had been attending, which I didn't know, a recovery group, and had been really making some life changes. And he asked me, would you consider reconciling? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, right. I don't think so. But then the Lord is just like, Linda. I'm like, no. Okay. But as you can see, 3 years ago, we got remarried. So
3 years ago.
yeah, and God has been, what happened was God gave me a husband who could do ministry with me.
Huh.
That's what happened. And he is the one who's saying, Linda, you are made to write, and you are made to do theology, and you're made to, pastor. You need to go do that. And it's my job to see that you get to do that. Now, who could do that except God, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of my story. And somewhere in the midst of there, as I was here in Tennessee, I had known for several years God wanted me to write a book. He didn't say what. So I was like, okay, I'll write one. And I was doing, I got a good package deal from Westbow Press, which is self-publisher. And I decided, Linda, you need to do this.
Yeah.
And I had several people, say, Linda, you need to make a collection of your blogs, Our Life in the Trinity blogs, and put them on there, put them in a tangible way where we can, so that's what I did. And when I got it published, I got a stack of books, and the same, I think it was like that same month, I got a call out of the blue from Jeff Rodnecks, who lives up in Ohio with GCI, and he invited me to a Converge event, which I had no idea what that was. And but I knew I had to take my books, and I took them up there, and it was on racial reconciliation, which was what Making Room really speaks to that. And I just handed them out. That's what I did. So I didn't really make any money on this book at all. I spent a lot of money on it, but I just handed those books out. And anybody that I knew in ministry and GCI just tried to, have it as a resource for people to say, hey, think about the implications of the Trinitarian life, that we're included, that God loves us this much. What does that look like? And having experienced that myself, the journey from being in this place where I was enslaved to a place where I'm free to be who I am, who God made me to be. Wow. So
Yeah.
I was reading my book the other day. I'm like, no, I'm not real happy with it, because I feel like there's so much more that can be said better. But it's
a holy dissatisfaction that's calling you to more.
yeah. So the Lord, the beginning of this year, our churches, I have 2 churches I pastor, have chosen to close, or that's how God has orchestrated it. In February, March, I was diagnosed with malignant melanoma, so I'm working with that. And between the 2 of them, June 26th will be the end of my pastoral leadership here. And then the Lord just wants me to focus on writing. So that's, for now, that's where I'm going. So That's kind of my journey. I don't know if
Okay.
that's what you wanted.
Well, you're doing good. I'll keep feeding stuff to you. So tell us about your GCI experience, your experience at the school, at the
Oh, okay. Well, when I was after the divorce and I was looking for a place to go to church, I had been church hopping.
Mhm.
So I had gone to Bible churches and Baptist churches and Christian churches and Methodist churches, trying to find a place for my kids and me to be in a community, a spiritual community.
Mhm.
And then the Lord made it clear to me that I needed to go back to a GCI church. He said to me, I have something for you to do.
Hmm.
I was like, okay. Because I had started out on the journey over here and was over here. So he was making his journey. You know, he was wanting me to participate in what he was doing in GCI. My congregation kept getting smaller and smaller as they, you know, they stopped going to church on Saturday, decided to go on Sunday, you know, well, then all was smaller, you know, and it was just attrition. And but they started having me preach and they started having me do pastoral stuff. And so the pastor, though, he was not able to take the Grace Communion Seminary courses for whatever reason. He just couldn't do it. So he asked me if I would. And I had been trying to find a master's course that I could take, a master
Yeah.
degree course. And so I said, okay, if you guys will help me, I will start. And so I completed my Master's of Pastoral Studies in 2012, about 2012, 2013, about the time I came to Tennessee. What happened there when I went to seminary was I was introduced to T.F. Torrance and I fell in love with his writings.
Where did you start with him?
I think it was The Mediation of Christ. I'm not real
Let's
certain
start.
because I also was enchanted with Dr. McKenna, John McKenna.
Yeah.
He was a challenge for me because half the time, you know, you would ask him a question, he wouldn't answer it. He would ask you one back, or he'd, you know, go off on, and you'd be like, huh? So he was such an intellectual challenge for me, a real, you know, inspiration at the same time. And he was always encouraging me and supportive of me. So between him and then reading Karl Barth and of course James Torrance, I read his on ministry. But T.F. Torrance, what I loved that really had a big impression on me was his science and theology. And integrating that in such a way and seeing how science and theology speak to one another and inform one another. At least that's the way it should be. And how it's one, you know, it's not two different spheres, you know, it's here, this is together, they're one. And that was a powerful thing for me. My family, my brothers, my dad, very intellectual, very you know, being smart was something to be admired. And as a woman, you know, I'm always trying to keep up, you know. That was the mentality. I'm just gonna say it doesn't, that's the way it is. It's just that was the mentality.
It's the world you grew up in.
Yeah. So to read that and to look at the world in a totally different way, to have a totally different worldview regarding science and theology was powerful for me. And then to learn to take classes in the history of the Christian church from the time of Christ on, and to really, because what I had learned at Ambassador was totally different worldview. this was, and I was like, wow, this is really what happened. Wow, and it just put a lot of pieces together for me. And
Can you make a distinction as I thought I've been told this, but I came to see this?
yes, yes, yes.
Can
So
you outline that? Yep.
yeah, the other day I was going through all the stuff at one of the churches, and they had stacks. They had a series of the old Bible story books for the kids. Remember I don't know if any of you were part of that, but
Monty Wolverton.
yes,
Or Basil Wolverton, or I can't remember which one
yes,
did those.
and those were terrifying to me as a child, And I had one of the ladies go, "Oh, these are so great."
Here's the Bible story.
Yeah.
I still have them.
She was saying to me, I should give these to my kids, my grandkids or something. I'm like, oh my word, and she goes, "Do you want them?" And I said, I would never give them to any children. I said, I grew up on those. No, not ever. So that, the Monty Wolverton pictures, the wrath of God.
They were so graphic. They were so graphic, and that there's lots of violence in the Old Testament. And it wasn't until we made the change that even anybody thought about actually doing a Bible story starting with the New Testament. Like that's how far off we were.
That is exactly right. It is so true. And so it was, for me, and part of my journey, like I said, in my family, my marriage, learning as a woman, my place, that I had value and worth for myself, for who I was, with all my own giftings and so on. Part of the journey from slavery to grace is these wrong ways of looking at how you do relationship. You do relationship by the rules. If you're a good wife, you will, and you give yourself good list. The Proverbs 31 woman, I used to hate to read that because I knew I could never ever do it. I was never going to be good. And I constantly was battling depression. I already have a genetic disposition that way. I did not need the help of all the, the negativity of it all. So part of the journey I had been on since about the beginning of my marriage, I think like 3 or 4 years into my marriage. We were married 13 years and then we were divorced 17. So, but about 5 years in, I realized I'm in trouble here. I'm in serious trouble. And then I had to deal with things like boundaries. I discovered Plowden Townsend's boundary book. One of the pastors had gotten up and talked about boundaries. I didn't even know what that was. I was like, huh? But when I read it, I was just like, I ate that up. I was like, how do I do that? I need to do that. I want to do that. How do I do that? What does that look like? And so I'm on the journey of psychological change, emotional change, alongside of the spiritual journey of grace and faith. And what does that look like, in relationship with God? And so the change from legalism to grace was big. But then when I met, was through reading Torrance and Barth and the others into Christ-centered Trinitarian theology, that was like the icing on the cake. I mean, that was even a farther journey into healing and wholeness. So, I just have to stand today when I run into the old voices of thou shalt, or you should, or you ought to. Now I can say, well, Jesus, I guess you're gonna have to, because it's not gonna be me. So that's okay. So it's a huge change. And I just feel so grateful to God. That's where I'm at today, is just thank you, Jesus. Thank
Yeah.
you, Father, for caring enough not to leave, because my mom and dad, they didn't make the transition.
Really?
Um
Are they still alive or?
no, they passed
Yeah.
away. My dad
Yeah.
passed in 2009 and my mom in 2015, I think it was.
Uh-huh.
So
Right.
she
Well, you
actually
did.
she actually went to church with us and listened to me preach. I was shocked, but
Yeah.
she had a passport because she was going to the place of safety. So
Uh-huh.
where she was going to go. So
Right. And did you also have mentioned Baxter Kruger has had an impact on you as well? Is that?
yes, I've been, in fact, was listening to him some this week to be reminded, because I'm still on a journey, reading my book. I can see I'm still on a journey. I don't understand everything fully yet.
Journey's good.
And that's good. But he was helpful in helping me to come to, and I'm still, I can tell I'm still in the learning process of this, but the
I
whole
hope you
thing
never
about,
get out of that.
no, and I'm glad, because I love it.
Yeah.
But what he did for me was he helped me understand that all of life is in Christ. And that includes, the everyday, that, I went yesterday, well, actually earlier today, I felt the Lord saying to me, I was doing an errand. I just happened to go by where my daughter works. And I felt the Lord say, well, I want you to go over to that place and go find a little something to take over to her. I'm like, what? Okay. So I go over and he goes, go right into the building, go right. So I went into the building, went right. All there is a Starbucks. I'm like, I'm not buying her Starbucks. She doesn't like Starbucks. But I walked over to the counter and there's these little truffles, right? He says, get a couple of those and take those over. So I was like, okay. So I got a couple of them, little candies, walk over, and she's next door. And I go, I'll never find her in this huge store. She works for Hobby Lobby. And he says, no, it'll be easy. Sure enough, there she is. And she's going a beeline somewhere. So I caught her. And she looked like she was not in a good place. And so she goes, what are you doing here? I said, well, I just happened to be here and I was supposed to come give this to you, And so she's like, oh, these are cool. What are these? Like, I told her about them. And pretty soon I'm getting hugs, and she says, I'm on my 15. I just started. And then she goes, and we walked through the store and talked and just chatted. And by the time I left, she was in a better place. And so what is that? That wasn't my idea. And it wasn't what I wouldn't have known she needed that. That was a moment, life in Christ. I mean, we did that together. It was his idea, and it was his guidance, and it was his direction. And there was something that he did that I got to be a part of. That was cool, and it was my daughter, but I felt in my spirit, this is what I am to do as a mother. And she's a grown up, but still, I was able to bless her, and that's what I'm supposed to do, So that's something he taught me, is that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it tends to be, you may have noticed this, that Torrance and Bart studies tend to be dominated by men.
Yeah.
You probably noticed that. And even the reading group, I think there's, less than 5% women who have registered, to be members. So, and yet there is something about the nature of what it is, a relational way of life. I've had people, when I lecture on the Trinity, say, you have a feminine Trinity. And it's like, because I have a God of grace and love and compassion, that's feminine. Well, what does that make the male, and what does that make God? But so it raises the question about just, you are transitioning out of these churches, but maybe your ministry is just beginning.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, that the one thing Lord really pressed on me was to continue our life in the Trinity and to do more with it.
Yeah.
And so then what I'm thinking is, okay, and to create an online community of people who are learning about what it means to live life in the Trinity, to that all of life is we're all included. What does that look like? I mean, I really feel strongly our generation desperately needs to know what it means that there is no part of life that's separated from God. I mean, you can even go all the way into sexuality and into just about anything. He's there. And if you invite him to participate with you, and he's already invited you to participate with him, it's like this mutuality. If you go into that place, it changes things. And I desperately need to know that it changes.
So you said your book on mutuality had lots to do with racial diversification and overcoming distinctions there, but there's still this huge gender issue. To say the world of theological thinkers is impoverished in many ways with good women Trinitarian theological thinkers who get to the level of where it is that you're thinking. And there does tend to be a bit of an over focus. I mean, I'm going to the Karl Barth conference, leaving this Saturday night, and there'll be some women there, but the voices are largely male, and the females they're gaining a voice. I mean, there's some very prominent females, but they're kind of still fighting for a place, and they're still fighting at a level that isn't quite going where you're making room is. So the question about, if I were to ask you, what is the message? I mean, if there was something you say, my ministry from now on is going to be about, and I mean, there is this general sense, but it's something that's unique to you. I mean, I think all Trinitarian thinkers say, I want to bring grace to people's lives and I want to have people feel included. But what is there about who you are that is unique to you, bringing something that is Linda Rex's gracious way of being and writing and all that to bring to the conversation?
Oh, that's a toughie. The one thing that I have felt, and maybe this is a little back around the circle answer for you, but for the last 2-3 years, I've had this vision in my head of a place where we could do both ministry and life, and such things as create a community where people come together and do things like art together, do music together, do recovery groups together, it didn't matter what it was, we come together, and not just to come into a sanctuary and do church, but to do life, and things like, and I think that's kind of in the back of my mind. I've had this thing of helping others see that they're not living life alone. They're not off on a hill by themselves. The whole Trinitarian life is that of making room for one another, of pouring out from myself into that one, and that one making space for me, but then pouring into me while I make space for them. And so then that means I don't care who you are, there's room for you at that table. So that means God created you, and this is something the Lord is really working with me to understand, is God created each of us uniquely related to him, uniquely related to one another, but even more than that, he made us unique persons with unique gifts and abilities. And for many years, I felt like I had to be good at everything. I didn't have permission to be good at what I was good at. What I was good at was music and art and writing, but I didn't have permission to be that. And what I feel so strongly is each of us has something that God created us like that.
Yeah.
You know, when about 2 years ago, it was recommended that I do an enneagram, which I was like, that's kind of creepy, weird. But I went ahead and I did it. And then I discovered that I was a mediator. And I think I already knew I was a mediator. And then it was like, that's why I do that. That's why I do that. That's why my husband and I couldn't get along, because he was this way, I was this way. And it was like, but when we know that, we become better whole. When we work within the reality of who we are and we let each other be who we are, then become a better whole. And our society could become a better whole if we weren't so busy defending our own little spot or trying to make everyone be like us, you know, to make everyone the same. What's the point? You know, but if we could instead say, this is your unique, you need to shine. And yeah, it'll infringe on me a little, but maybe if I make a little room for you, you make a little room for me to just be who I am, then together, look at what we could do. And so I feel like we just miss out on so much because we're so busy, you know, well, they're less than me because I'm, you know, or they're, you know, or I'll never be that good, you know, instead of like, look how they shine. How can make this better? So
I want to give you
comment there, Marty.
You can, but let me look, if I can just throw out those one word to it, and then I'll give it over to you, Dwayne. Just a second. So take the word mediator and just shift it a little bit and see if the word empowerer makes a difference. Because mediator stands between two people in conflict, and empowerer just sees what hasn't been seen and brings empowerment to that person's life. So anyway, I think that there's something in you in that, and we'll pursue that more, but I want to give it back to Dwayne here. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about Dr. Houston and his teaching. And this is the amazing thing, that you never get this platform, but your uniqueness is the gift that God gives you. And the more your life is hid in Christ with God, the more your uniqueness shines. See, that's the freedom you have, because no one can tell you who you are except your creator. And the mistake is you're asking the stranger to tell you who you are. They can't tell you who you are. And that's where, you know, Jim would say on the human level, when we're looking for recognition, we say, oh, thank God I'm not like you, or woe is me, I'm not like you, because we don't know what to do with our uniqueness. And he calls that an existential anxiety or existential loneliness. And unless you're in dialogue with the Father who knows you, that's why that knowledge, we cry, Abba, Father, right at the core of our being, where we don't know how to pray as we ought, as we should, but the Holy Spirit groans with inexpressible groans right at the core of our being, and he's closer to us than we are to ourselves. And you see this, like I see this transformation in you, where that's the greatest gift you could ever have, because once you understand your uniqueness, then you realize the power of freedom. Until you understand uniqueness, you cannot be free, because you're not free to be yourself. And it's Christ who deals with you. He calls it particularizing, where Jesus or the Father, if you've never been particularized by your Father, you don't understand. You do have that support from your family to be who you're meant to be. And we're not all the same. And so that's why that diversity, unity and diversity, and shared mutuality, those are concepts of the Trinity that need to inform our social interaction, but we are too stuck on individualism and abstractions.
Right. Yeah. Good word, Dwayne. Yeah.
So how much have you read of Ray Anderson?
Oh my, I know I recognize the name, and I'm sure I have. I just can't at the top of my head think of what.
So Ray Anderson in a sense has a parallel to a lot of your life journey, in that he was a pastor who also taught at Fuller Seminary. He did his doctoral work under T.F. Torrance. So he's, he's profoundly Trinitarian, but he wrote as an Iowa farmer.
Oh,
He
really?
wrote as somebody who grew up in, that part. So he has, lessons my father taught me, but he also has on being family, on being persons, or on being human. And then books like The Soul of Ministry. He has a book on Christian counseling, one on death. So he's dealing in those kind of life issues that I hear as part of what it is that you have interest in bringing out. So I think that there's something about his vision of what it meant to think, out of the Trinity into a holistic way of living, is something that could continue to give you a focus in what it is that you're doing. And I'd say he was a very empowering person. He was one of my 3 doctoral examiners.
Oh, was he?
PhD,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm gonna write that down, Ray Anderson.
Ray S. Anderson, yeah. Todd Spidell and Chris Kettler have also done some Festschrift, some books that are in honor of Ray Anderson that continue the themes of the nature of counseling and the care of persons and all that I think echo what I hear as part of what God is doing in and through you. So
Oh.
those would be interesting for you as well. The title of your book, Making Room, in a sense, has some of the clues to that. I think. Again, this whole idea, your subtitle, Living with One Another in Our True Humanity. There is this livingness piece that I hear from you, that inclusion, participation, all that isn't merely theory, but it's something that you want to see in arts community and support groups, that inclusion and living doesn't just stay in the realm of thought, but that there are practical modes of gathering that are there. And I have a sense that men are not as good at gathering, and that women have a more of a gathering sense, and making room certainly is inclusive of that. So to have the sense that for you to both be that person who is empowered to be a gatherer, and at some level it's to be an encouragement to other women. You don't need to hide in the shadows here. This is not a men's game. The men have been playing it, but you need to be seen and heard for what it is that you are, as somebody who has some natural intuitions, maybe because you're a motherer, or because you have been oppressed in a male world and you recognize that doesn't work, and you have a fire in your belly that is about goodness and support of people who need to be seen. And I mean, there is kind of an unleashing of it's kind of like Pentecost. It's the unleashing of people who already knew a language, but they're given languages beyond what they even knew. And in a sense, they're not an end in themselves, but they're available vessels to do great things because they become available for God. I don't know, when you see in Grace Communion fellowships, do you see women really being given empowerment, really being given the voice and opportunity to talk about, and I'll use the word here that I really want to break up earlier, their story? The particularity you talk about is that people's specific stories are heard is partly where the uniqueness and the particularity shines out. So do you feel that GCI has really let women's stories be heard and valued?
I have to say, from what I've gathered, is there are congregations where, yes, that is very true, and there are those that no, it's not true. I can tell you for sure, I know of at least 2 or 3 congregations where I would not be accepted as a female pastor. So no condemnation there. It's just, they're just not at that place yet. However, I think about our congregation, the leadership team I worked with, for it kind of morphed over time. I've been here almost 10 years. Many of the people who worked, especially in the Nashville congregation, who were instrumental in loving well the people in the community, that was women. And it now there were men who did too, but it was for the most part the ones that understood the inclusion and the love. It was women. And so it, as far as the tangible aspects of actually doing what we believe as the Trinitarian vision. Other congregations, I think it's just that they're not to the place where they take seriously what Paul said about neither male nor female, that it's our humanity that Christ took on. And I say humanity, it's human flesh, but it's who we are. He took that on and transformed it. And so it's not a male dominated world. You know, it's just, that's to have that means we're missing something important. The other
part of the
side
human
of it.
race. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know Torrance and Bart both kind of spoke to that whole issue of, I'm thinking of T.F. Torrance, spoke to that whole issue of it's the humanity that he took, the wholeness of our humanness he took on, because it's not one side or the other. It's not, you know. So I feel like we've made progress. I feel like GCI is in their theology and in their leadership and in their the fact that I was asked to be on a board, to act as a board member. I mean, how, you know, they're making space for us as women. They're including us in leadership. I'm beginning to see women included in other areas where they weren't included before. So I believe it's there. It's getting there. But I also believe that on a local level, though, there's a lot of work to be done, because there's still not everyone's understands Jesus and exactly what he did. I mean, you know, the extent of it, I guess, is
breaking down the walls and transforming the traditions. And Todd wrote, Reyes Anderson, South Dakota farmer and rancher, in the middle age, he switched to being a pastor who refused payment for the rest of his life. And he was a pastor the whole time he was a professor at Fuller. So he really lived that life of sacrifice and empowerment as well. And again, the whole thing with male female, it's not like I ever want to switch from males being dominant to women being dominant. It's really, you know, we are the family of God. We can do this together, and we each bring gifts to this challenge. So in counseling, often I find, you know, one or the other has a complaint against the other for being too much. And there's a sense of, you know, am I going to have the power? Or are you going to have the power? And it's always, you've got to learn the language of we. We have to learn to do this together. And so that's what I'm really wanting to encourage you, and you're listening to the Spirit, to say, how do I become a vessel where we as men and women are doing this together, and to recognize a lot of women have their own barriers that they're not proper boundaries, they're really just barriers. And I always say a proper boundary is a fence that has a gate in it. Right, there's room for the interchange that's there, but there's also a recognition that one might spill over and take over the other person's space. So for the story that you have to live, where you grew up in a world where women weren't valued, your voice was not valued, and the Spirit is breaking down those walls, there are still many who live in a kind of slavery, probably. And your story is important, and part of their release, to hear that you can recognize those things, and you're not condemning those people necessarily. It is simply to say that the nature of the time in history that we are in, we are just awakening to something that the Spirit's been trying to do for 2,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so hope should be our major focus. And the nature of that focus is, as you said, quoting Paul, in Christ is neither male or female, Jew or Greek, that to break down our cultural and ethical. And I mean, we never want to throw out people from Iowa loving the land and, loving their roots. But there's something about Jesus in that place doing something. And so in Arkansas, in Tennessee, in each one of these places, it's easy to think they're monocultures, but they all have their uniquenesses.
Yeah.
And there are gifts to it, and there are things that can be brought out and said, the Spirit includes us into a new way of being that doesn't have those limitations.
Right.
See, Ted has put up Ray Anderson's book on being human, essays in theological anthropology is excellent on the topic of co-humanity and related topics of the Imago Dei, etc., very much in line with what Linda has written. So that's Ted encouraging you that there are things there to discover in that. So I think, the thing that I'm really hearing from you, both in your reading and your speaking, is that you're not done. One, you're somebody who has really found the fruit of what good Trinitarian theology is in understanding a God who really liberates people. And in some ways, your growth process is finding who is it that you are called to help in the liberation process. And the particularity piece that you mentioned is part of that. When somebody doesn't feel like I conform to the model of a good pastor or whatever, that it's like, well, you being you would probably be a good pastor instead of you being something that's not you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I do see you as a storyteller. I mean, the nature of the way you format each of your chapters, you include story really in a very nice way. And I think story is so much what Jesus used. And it is part of the gift that I hope that you continue to bring out in your writing. And I would even wonder about you writing with some other women, and that you would go in not knowing what it is that you're going to say or that they're going to say, but that you'd say, tell me your story, and let's just talk about our story together, and let's see what new story arises out of our writing something together. And so your story has this catalyst capability, I think, of them going, oh, you can do that, or you did that. And hearing their story, it's like, you have some amazing gifts. Has anybody ever told you, what it is that I see? And for them to say, well, I've had a hint here and a hint there, but what do you see? And so I just wonder about the story of the dialogue of your life with other women, what that would do at opening up avenues of growth, not only for that other person, but for other people to hear in the conversation their own interplay. That's interesting. What they're saying, I can see where there's things that I've been living in the shadows and in bondage. So anyway, I just think that you are a person who has some intuitions and some abilities and that desire for the on the ground piece, that could just be an interesting thing for you to pick up on. Does that resonate with you at all?
Well, I was thinking early on, before I did any, wrote my book, I was contacted by Sheila Graham, and she had put together a collection of essays by women regarding, I think, the trans women in the WCG, the experience they went through. And so I had an essay included in that book. And I felt that, reading my story in the midst of their story was, in a way, healing, because I saw that I was not unique in the journey I had had.
Yeah.
And so it does resonate with me. I think about much of what I learned about the hands-on thing, I learned in the context of the women in my congregation that were so involved. They were my team members. One of the first things I was asked to do when I was ordained was to create a team and, to do pastoring with me. And I always followed that policy to have a group around me that we did ministry together.
Yeah.
And they understood the Trinitarian theology and so on. And so to do it together really helped me to get beyond my just hanging out here in the theology and the crowds into actually what does that look like in
Live theology.
in helping a homeless person or helping someone who's depressed, or what does that look like? And that, you know, so I can it makes sense to me to try that.
Yeah. Good. Well, I mean, I think the whole world, theology can be so much what we do in a classroom or something that doesn't have that lived sense to it.
Mhm.
And I mean, when you just said, and of course it was my daughter, as though she's an exception to the rule of what it means for you to be a
Right.
loving, ministering person. It starts at home. I mean,
Yeah.
to say that the very nature of the way that we bring our Trinitarian thinking to our family and to be listening to the Spirit says, give a gift. Well, what gift do you want? I mean, that whole process of
Yeah.
thinking through of, you know, what it means to be listening to the Spirit, what it means to be obedient to the acts of love for the people who are tangible in front of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's all good. It's good stuff.
And that what you said about my daughter is actually, that's the journey God has on me right now that we're working through. Is I've been so busy in ministry outside the doors. He wants me to come back home. Let's do it here for a while.
Yeah.
And we're just in that place. And so, yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
And for you to hear yourself say that and to say, if I think that ministry is just being the head of a church and now I'm not in ministry,
Yeah.
you're kind of invalidating your basic thesis
Right.
in a sense
Right.
that says ministry is only a position. It's
Yeah.
only where there's a set of rules and laws and things that go along with it. But when
Right.
I'm just doing relationships, then I'm out of ministry.
Right.
When maybe it's the other way around, right?
Exactly. And I think that's what the Lord has been kind of working with me on is
Yeah.
And I think you can do that when you're a pastor, is you can kind of cubbyhole, you know, okay, I'm doing ministry here, and then this is this is my family, or this is something else. And you don't do it intentionally. Maybe you do it intentionally. I don't know. But I've always felt like I had to drop everything to be with my family. My family's been, you know, integral in a lot of ways in my life to ministry and so on. But lately I've seen that, you know, maybe I just need to come back and start over and look again at what does it mean that all of life is in Christ? What does that mean? And what does it mean that I do life with people, you know,
Mhm.
people that I don't know? What does that look like? You know,
Yeah.
for me, because I was raised that you don't talk to the neighbors, you don't get involved, you know, with anybody on your street, you know, you
Really?
don't, you know, and then now I'm this pastor who has to knock on doors and talk to people that I don't know. And, you know,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is tough. But God is like got me on this journey of all of life. What does that
Yeah.
mean? All of life.
Yeah.
That means, you know, when I get up in the morning, hey, you know what? I'll make waffles because I know everyone's gonna like that, and that'll make their day get off to a good start. Huh.
Yeah.
That whose idea was that? You know, it's Jesus. You know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So will you make a promise to me that when you're no longer the head of a church, you won't say I'm not in ministry anymore?
I promise.
Okay.
It came out of my mouth, so it means I'm still working on that.
Yeah, good. I just
'Cause
want you to,
I agree that I'm in ministry all the time. I mean, it's just
yeah.
life ministry, but
And you may find words for that, but I think it's it's not just for you, it's for others. It's
yeah,
for the other people who feel like if I don't have a position where I'm paid or given a title, then I'm not in ministry.
right.
And for you to say, the greatest days of my ministry life, I think, are yet to come. And as I wait on the Spirit to show me what that looks like, I believe that it's beyond maybe what I can even imagine.
Yeah.
But it is full-time, full life ministry.
Yeah.
And to speak it boldly and loudly and have other people say, huh, maybe that could be me too.
Yeah.
Right. It's a whole other form of the me too. It's a positive side of
Yeah.
of what it looks like to say, me too. That's me. I want to be that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So I wonder if you would read for us your poem, Overwhelm Me, and then tell me a little bit about this of the story of where that came from.
Sure. Give me just a sec. I need glasses.
That's okay.
Overwhelm me. The vacuum of my soul, so empty of all that matters. The callous indifference to suffering and need. The coldness toward those in pain and the slave who should be freed. How is it that love surrounds and love consumes? Yet here I am left untouched, indifferent to what is meant to heal and comfort. Lost and yet found, cold and yet warmed by the love of one who would give me all. Unrequited, unaccepted, cascading fountains of love and grace. Open the gates of my heart, dear Spirit, that the King of Glory might come in, that Abba might rest and let comfort and ease, and your rivers of life might flow freely through the caverns, crumbling them, turning them into free flowing streams of living water for lost souls.
Which
I
is very
felt like-
powerful. So tell me about that.
I think it was an attempt to express a coming awareness of look at all God has done. What are you going to do with that? You know, are you just going to ignore that? Are you going to go on blindly by? Or, you know, are you going to embrace that and, you know, put yourself under the flowing streams and just revel in it, you know, and begin to live in it? And it was, I think that was my effort to try and just say, you know, here, wake up, look what God has done. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a powerful motivator to see all those things. And I mean, there's a little bit there. I hear the heart of a theological doctor. Often with my students, I say, I'm going to train you all here to be doctors. And so you have to both see the patient's need, but not condemn them for their need, but be a presence of hope and voice that allows them to recognize there are better ways of being and doing. And so I hear that sense of you seeing all that is possible. And so to be a great woman theological doctor, you've done pastoral work, you know the challenges of community, and you've been with people both in the church as well as outside the church. And you can see, and if we use the word dis-ease to say there's something about Paul's word of being, I've learned to be content in everything. To not be in that shalom place of contentment is to be in a place of dis-ease.
Yes.
Right. So people are in dis-ease in their marriages, and you experience that. And people are in dis-ease in their skin as women or as a minority or whatever. And to say the gospel speaks to that dis-ease.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have an intuition there that I just want to encourage you to keep letting that intuition blossom into answering the question, how does a doctor with good intuition, because doctors, they have some basic things they know, which you know basic things, and they have a ton of intuition that really plays out, you know, in this particular case, how do I bring my wisdom to bear on something that isn't none of them are exactly clear-cut cases, and some of them are just pure mystery.
Yeah.
But you're making room piece is partly making a room for shalom. It's partly making a room in the world for people to experience love and grace in their space where they know that they are freed from the things that stop them, the dis-ease that stops them.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with societal expectations, their own family voices that have told them they should or shouldn't or can't do something, which you've had those voices too.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think in all of that, your writing just has a wonderful opportunity to keep allowing for your story to keep discovering what does it mean to be a doctor at the highest level of being somebody who has deep roots in an understanding of the life of the triune God, but, and this is a very Torrancean thought, intuits in this place what the Spirit is saying and doing, is able to hear the story and to bring what it is that the Spirit is saying, what Jesus is saying to this woman or this man or this couple or this
Mhm.
road that where everyone's afraid of somebody on the street or a policy that's in place, and to say what is this triune life of God speak into this place. And I see that you just have so much of that in your bones, so to speak.
Thank you, Marty.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to see from someone else's eyes. So
Yeah.
yeah.
The question about the nature of the community, there's probably multi-levels. You have your blog that you do, which is all printed, right? I mean, it's online, but it's
Yes.
so I could see you doing something like what we do here too, where you have guests and conversations, and that you're partly making room for the voices of those who haven't been invited into a place of making room.
Right. Which
And
is yeah.
go ahead.
Oh, which is one of the things I have been considering doing. The other thing is my daughter would like to, this is her thing, is to do games together and to create a community where young people her age can just talk about stuff that interests them, and have my voice as just a offering, oh, well, this is my view. What do you think? What do you think about this? And just giving them space to listen and to meet them where they're at. And so that is one of the things we've been talking about.
I love it. That's great. And you could even, I mean, you could have those evenings, then say, let's do a Zoom talk and just talk about, what did we see just in the playing of games? What happened to the children we made room for them to play games?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of reflective work just on the nature of play. There's a book by, I think it's Joseph Hunzinger, called Homo Ludens. Are you familiar with that book?
No.
He's basically arguing that play is what we are made to do and to be, and that we lose the play and we become all those fettered, bounded people that have lost the very thing that we are made for. Jesus' statements about unless you have the heart of a child, I mean, in a sense, that's the place of playfulness. So part of what I'd expect is that you'd be learning from children. You're creating a space for them, making room for them, but you would learn from them. And I think to be able to really harvest that and tell the stories of what it means to give children room to be children, and what that becomes as a fertile ground for the Spirit doing the work, could just be really interesting. And you're attentive. I mean, it's obvious in your writing that you're attentive to what's going on in situations. So
yeah, that's I think that's the whole idea of creating an online community, is creating space where those things could happen, where people can be genuinely themselves, and yet we begin at that level, create a space where the Holy Spirit then can speak into that situation. Yeah. Do you see this about yourself, that God has made you like this? Yeah. And begin to speak, especially for someone her age, she's in her early 20s, to who is wrestling with identity and value and worth, and to speak into that, the truth, speak life,
Yep.
when everything around her is speaking death. What does that look like? And so if that is the way the Spirit continues to work that out, I think it would be very powerful and helpful.
Yeah. To just value her enough to say, I want to do this with you. I think you have a great idea. How can we partner in this? I mean, I think that is those can be life transforming things right there. And it is really participating in that empowering work of the Spirit, right?
Yeah. And I do something similar with my son, and he is a budding ornithologist, and so he needs to finish his college, but I don't know how to, that's his problem. But but to go with him as we take a walk once a week, and then we're out in nature, and to listen and to hear and to let him inform me and teach me, and I learn from him and he learns from me, and
Perfect.
Space, and the Holy Spirit speaks into those moments, and so the Lord is really taking me on a journey as far as even here at home. We were talking about ministry. Family is ministry. Every part of life is ministry. That's what God's been doing in me, is these little things that he's working on right now. And where that will end up, I don't know, but he knows, so that's all that matters.
What does an ornithologist do?
Study of birds.
Birds. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
you take him out on a walk, and he will hear birds that I don't hear, and he will tell you exactly what they are. And everything about them, and I'll be like, oh yeah, okay.
Right. Well, there's a lot about just the world of listening that's part of that I mean, it would be interesting to explore, what does it mean to listen and to have ears to hear? And I mean, these are great biblical themes, right?
Exactly.
And St. Francis had some, great affection for birds and God's care for them. So your son is, in a sense, doing that. So
and trying to
that's a
speak that
sharing and
sharing in his life.
Yeah. You said that you go and knock on neighbors' houses. What kind of a neighborhood do you live in?
Oh, I don't knock on my neighbors' houses. I live in on a cul-de-sac, and it's a little housing development. And if I go out to the main road, I'll go right into the country and left into the city. I'm in Metro Nashville, actually. But I know my neighbors, but I don't really know my neighbors. So
right.
I've found it difficult to get to know my neighbors. So
So I mean, we often have, evangelism. You go, you knock on the door and you say, you're ready to meet Jesus and all this stuff. But just to say, you've been my neighbor for a while. I don't know your story, and I don't think you know mine. Would you mind just telling me, where did you come from, and what are you doing here, and what's important to you in life? It's the sharing a story, and you may find that there comes a point where you say, it's been so wonderful getting to know you as a neighbor, and I'm just writing a story about what it means for me to be a neighbor. Do you mind if I include your story in getting to know you in my book? Right. And so I think this is evangelism. I mean, you are being a good news person by listening to their story and telling your own. And so because you're a writer, I think that that could be something you tie in. And it's the everydayness and the no fearness and I want to make room. It's a making room for the other kind of thing too, right? I mean,
and that's where I have to grow. I'm an introvert, so I can hide really well. I feel
Who told you were an introvert?
What's that?
Who told you were an introvert?
No, I have found this out about myself, that I am an extroverted introvert, because I function best with people I know, or I'm familiar with.
Right.
Otherwise, I tend to just hide inside myself. So, but We
It's funny that
knocking
hiding
at-
is the opposite of making room, isn't it?
it is. God is making me be myself, and I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah, but you can see it. You can see
Yeah.
it, and I love that. That's
Yeah.
great.
We as a congregation went door knocking is what we did. So I had a
And what was the
team of
agenda in
people.
that?
We had we wanted to invite him to a community event. One time it was to invite him to an event at the church. Another time was simply to take him a gift package for Christmas. Another time was to take him something for, I forget what, Easter, I think it was. We just took gifts around and say,
Oh.
hey, you know, and let them know a little bit about us. And it was not to preach the gospel or anything that way. It was merely to say, we're here, you know, we want you to know you're welcome. We have free meal here at the church every Sunday. We had a free meal, and so we were inviting him to come have lunch with us. So yeah, we did it in pairs. You know, we did it together in
Yeah.
community with one another, and a very powerful experience. But
Yeah.
it was,
So I'm thinking of inviting no one anywhere. You're just saying, I want to accept and know you right here as you are because you're my neighbor.
Mhm.
And you might bring some fresh baked something and say, do you mind just sitting on the doorstep, on the front porch or whatever? I don't know what it looks like there, but
Yeah,
bring a bistro table, whatever, and just say, I just want to hear your story. You're my neighbor.
yeah,
And I want to be the neighbor who knows my neighbors,
yeah,
and so and then people start saying, that Linda gal, she's the neighbor who wants to know her neighbors. And they start talking about you, and you're actually being a gospel person. You're making room
Yeah.
for neighbors to be neighbors and for them to be a neighbor.
yeah, yeah.
So when you do that, you have to tell me about it.
Okay. I'm just a little concerned because some of my neighbors carry pistols. so, so I'm a little
Well,
nervous about that, but
and I mean, I think you could say that to them, You're my neighbor. I do have concerns about you carrying a pistol, but I'm not going to let that stop me because I think behind that pistol is a person.
yes,
And I want to know the person and
right.
not just know you as the pistol.
You're absolutely right. So yeah, that is beyond my comfort zone, but I'm reaching out. I have on occasion dropped by. I like to bake bread, so I've done things like
Right.
baking bread and bringing it to my close neighbors, and
Yeah.
or taking a gift bag to them. But yeah, I just need to do more of it. So that's on
Well, you
my.
don't need to do anything. It's just opportunities to you living into who you are.
Yes, you're right.
Right. I think who you are is great. So it's just a matter of finding new ways of expressing exactly that.
Yeah, you're
So
right.
chapter 1, sharing the same earth and neighborhood.
Yeah,
So you're sitting in a Social Security Administration office, and you've got this person who is an uncomfortable neighbor.
yes.
And so were you comfortable there?
No,
Uh-huh.
but I was, and this is what's interesting is, I mean, I was there, and I was all right. I mean, I wasn't nervous or anxious, but I'm always discomforted by large crowds of people I don't know. It's just, I find that they're all God's, I can sit there and go, they're all God's people, and they're all loved by God, but
Yep.
that's my intellectual experience.
Yep.
But my emotional experience is anxiety.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, so then I'm like, I have to process this,
That's right.
and let God be God, and I
Is
know
God there with you?
absolutely.
Do you sense that?
Yes,
Does
yes,
perfect love cast out fear?
yes, it does, which is
Yeah.
why
So I mean
yeah,
yeah.
it's kind of
The idea of being reasonable, it's Craig McNair Wilson, I think you said, fear stands at the door of our brain like 2 sentries and says, who goes there?
Yeah.
So that's what reason does. Reason, when we go to our reason, we will always be stopped or slowed down or something. So love is unreasonable. It says, I will be driven by who I am, who this triune God is, and I will let love guide my path and not let reason and fear get in the way.
Mhm. Which
Which
is
you, in
why.
this story, you did that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. There are times when, you're walking in relationship with Jesus and you feel his presence strongly, and there's just nothing to be concerned about. And then there are other times when it's just, you're not in that place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you make the comment on page 3, talking and thinking about Jesus' humanity does not diminish him in any way, which, that's going against just making him the God up there, I think. So it is the one who's present in a social security office.
Mhm.
Through Jesus, we begin to find a commonality with God rather than just a separateness and uniqueness, which I think the telling of the story, which you're a wonderful storyteller. So, I mean, that's the telling of story is what helps to allow the sense of, well, you're just another human, well, you're just another woman or whatever. That's the commonness and the not uniqueness.
Yeah.
So I think your ability to be so attentive in these situations is wonderful to that, bringing out from something that's merely common to see the story that is there and the Jesus whose humanity is present even in your humanity.
Yeah.
Humanity is completely other than God, but God took on humanity in Jesus so that we would be and are connected to God in the very core of our being, God in human flesh, transforming humanity from the inside out so we can dwell forever with he who is completely other than us. Which again, it's to get that in the moment of being there with somebody that's being rude and impatient and all that. That's where the Spirit has this work where you become the very presence of Christ in a sense by knowing his presence. There is a patience in you, which, I mean, I think that's kind of where you really went to, is that the fruit of the Spirit showed up as you tuned into what does it mean to be submitted to this one. And it's really where you bring what so much theology misses, and that is, what difference does it make that I believe in a Trinitarian God if I don't act like it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And your stories all, I think they have that resonance
Mhm.
that this matters.
Yeah.
So you might say it's not a textbook, but maybe it is a textbook in a more practical kind of way. My wife's a dentist, so in dentistry, if you do a PhD, you're going to write textbooks for people about how to practice doing procedures or use medications or something. So at the very highest level, it's doing what you're talking about here, where in theology, most of our highest level theologians, they need interpreters, right?
Yes.
And you're one of those interpreters. But I just want to encourage you that the nature of what you're doing, it is pointing towards what dentistry has figured out, and that is we need to get very practical and lived ways of being for people's lives to change. So the best educators in the world, I think, are the dentists who have taught us to brush our teeth twice a day, probably at least twice a day, probably to floss at least once a day, maybe more. I mean, people, they've just learned that there's these basic things that are about healthcare, and it cares for you and the people who are around you, who where your what goes on into your whole oral world has to do with. So it's like there's so much to learn from dentistry that you are being, I think, the practical dentist here in a way.
Mm.
And I think that there's, even more you can help bringing down those specifics of, as a doctor, which I know you don't have your doctorate yet, but to think like a doctor, for me to think like a doctor is to recognize that in these moments where, these people can be intrusions. The Spirit says this, and I've learned, this is what I do to brush my teeth in that moment. Right?
Right.
So they're not final in a sense. And we know that if you eat beef and chicken, it's different from tomato soup in terms of what you're doing with the floss.
Right.
So nevertheless, there are these principles of the presence of Jesus, listening to the Spirit, seeing and listening to the person to tune into who they are. What is it the Spirit sees that you don't about what their needs are? I mean, all of those are the implications of what I think you see and hear that is missing from so many theology books.
Wow. Sorry. Just
You
wow.
get that though, right?
Yes. Yes.
And I'm encouraging you to say, you may write textbooks that help people that are teaching people how to brush teeth and all that in the realm of, being grounded in the Jesus of Scripture, knowing the heart of the Father, knowing that we are children of the Father. Most people don't even know that they are beloved of the Father, much less remember it. I mean,
Right.
and as I said in my first Facebook, if Jesus had written a theology book, the first one would have been about his Father, because everything he did was, he came to explain the Father to us, John
Right.
1:18,
Right.
the one who is in the heart of the Father, he's come to explain him to us. So what do? We talk about what we get out of Jesus because of the cross and all this, and easily leave the Father out. So
Right.
it's bad medicine.
Yeah.
Because if we don't know the love of the Father and are brought into that inclusive life of saying, I am a child of God, I am beloved, then
Yeah.
it's basic bad hygiene. Bill says, transforming humanity indeed. TFG referred to it as the atoning incarnation in the roundtable interview. That helps with understanding the vicarious humanity, the transformed humanity, doesn't it? So you can respond to that, or you can ask him to say more.
Oh, I wish you would say more.
More? No.
Thank you.
He's got a sense of humor. That's good.
Maybe it's just me, I'm sure, but I've never seen him link the adjective with incarnation that way. Maybe Marty, you could speak to that, or Linda, but the vicarious humanity of Jesus Christ is what, do I understand it correctly? The transformed or transforming humanity of Jesus Christ? Is that one and the same? Vicarious humanity?
Vicarious humanity and transforming humanity. In his vicarious humanity, where he takes on our humanity and we see ourselves in him, it becomes transforming of humanity generally. But as we, by the Spirit, become new persons in Christ, we are transformed. So the nature of our Western thought, I will be transformed if I go to school and get my head filled with things. No, not necessarily. You might end up with a head full of things, but you're still the same person. Or I will be transformed if I do something with my physical world, if I change my environment or move to a new place. No, you might just be the same person in a different place. But when you meet the person of Jesus, when Jesus says to you, you are mine, and I have brought you to myself, all that you are, all that you were, I embrace, I love you to death. Yeah. It's something like when you meet the person who becomes your spouse, you can say, I'm the same person, but I'm not. Their love transformed me. And so the transforming humanity of Jesus is when Jesus isn't just a theory, or he isn't just the person who's a picture on the wall when we go to church, but he speaks a word to us and we say, me? Are you talking to me? You love me like that? The transformation happens in that. And so if we use the word vicarious humanity and it doesn't get to that dialogue, it's not going to be transformative. He will have done it, but we won't be living in the reality because it won't have become personal.
And that's what Linda writes about. Yes.
Linda does write about that. That's, I mean, that is one
I
of
mean,
the
that's the very heart of
things.
her,
Yeah.
is the I mean, for me, the vicarious humanity that Thomas Torrance that made me begin to think about, made Jesus somehow more real. It's
Yeah.
realist
Yeah.
stuff, and that's what got my attention in the McKenna class, John McKenna class.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He really helped me to kind of take that leap, because he brought, I mean, the whole thing about T.F. Torrance and science, and then helped me understand that even in you think about Jesus at conception as the cells in Mary's womb, all of a sudden down to the very smallest item in creation is never going to be the same ever again, because God has entered human flesh or taken on human flesh. And so from that point on, you see our cosmos now is, there's something new at work here with us, in us. And that was the vision I got from his classes and from Torrance and so on, was then if that is true, then that means, I mean, that goes down into my everyday life and even my body and my cells. And yes, I'm battling cancer, but Jesus need only speak the word and those cells go back to what they should be. You know, he's the one who's Lord over, you know, I mean, he's present right now by the Spirit. His Spirit can do whatever the Spirit wants to do, you know. And so it just, that really informed everything I wrote, was that the fact of Jesus, God coming, it made everything new. It did something, you know, it's the intersection of, you know, God and man, you know.
Yeah.
And Torrance said atoning, at one humanity, our incarnation. So we're united with Jesus, yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
In that humanity.
Yes.
That blows my mind.
Yeah.
And a very good.
You think about, I think it's, you know, they both Bart and Torrance talk about how Jesus came and he forged into our humanity the capacity for God to come and dwell in human flesh. I mean, he hammered it out. He uses that kind of language. And that's powerful, because that means God did something new, something wonderful, amazing, that if we really understood it, would make a huge difference in our life. You know, if I really got my mind and heart around that, I would be knocking on my neighbor's doors all week long, you know, but I'm just not, you know, I'm still in that place where I'm, okay, God's working it out, you know, but
today's your transforming day. Yeah, the section I'm working in right now in Bart's Dogmatics 3:2, he's talking about Jesus as the man for God and Jesus as the man for others.
Right.
And he says at some level, we are not that. We are not for God and we are not for our neighbors. We are very self-interested. And when I say I am, it's all about who I want to become. When we really meet Jesus, we have the capacity in Jesus to truly be those who are for God. And it's a confirmation of our humanity. Otherwise, we are inhuman. To deny God and to deny our neighbor is to be inhuman.
Yes.
And so this whole forging of the new person, it comes in recognizing that the one who is truly human, truly for God, and truly for me and for you, he truly is for me, and he awakens me and brings me in that transforming moment to recognize that he has released me, taken away the boundaries of the walls, and said, there's nothing that you can do or need to do to become mine, because that is what I have already done. That's the completed thing.
Yeah.
So our yes to his yes is a confirmation of the reality. And this is where I use the word realist. The nature of the science of the personal is we had seen you before today, and we hear your voice every once in a while, but we have done science in discovering you because you have spoken and told us your story. And so the nature of the transforming of our relationship and even who we are is because we allow good realist science to be done in letting you tell your story, and for us to enter into what it is that that God's been doing in and through you, who you are, not just as a silent person who we can have all kinds of ideas about. And Bart talks about, if we don't do this, we will have all kinds of ideas about the other that really aren't the other. And so we become, inhuman, even in just all the projections that we do there. So Jesus truly does come and speak to us, and truly does transform us, first by just saying who he is and what he's been up to and what he's done for us. And that is the realest thing. And good science listens well and lives in the light of the reality that is there. And then we are transformed in the light of recognizing what is reality instead of the illusions. He talks about masks and illusions, and that even sitting in a church, we have masks on God and we have masks on ourselves, just trying to, do the role thing and the rules thing, and it all misses the point. And as Bill says, it is in your storytelling and bringing in your experience of, the livingness of Jesus with you, that in a sense you're doing scientific theology. If we have room for the science of the personal,
Right.
which if we don't, then the world is only an object, and that's all we can talk about.
Right.
But I just say it's a half truth, and a half truth is basically an untruth.
Yeah.
Can I quote some Kierkegaard here? I just
Kierkegaard.
Life has to be lived forward, but it can only be understood looking backwards. And that's the nature of so many people who stuck with the project of discovering the Trinity in CGI and wherever else they went, and where they got educated to and how they joined this community. They blossomed in a way that they could have not known otherwise of what their potential was.
Yeah.
We in the 70s in the church, we used to talk about the incredible human potential, but we had no idea how it was possible. But it's Jesus taking on our humanity that makes everything possible. And I like Tom's saying, where the humanizing human and the personalizing person, that we start off meeting him as the humanizing human, and that's where we're at. But when we're filled with the glory of the life of the light shining in us and transformed to be like he is, we will fully understand what it means to be persons, and he's going to name us in a way that only he can, and describe us in our individual uniqueness. And that fellowship and koinonia that we're going to experience is so far beyond what we experience now, but we get to taste it and see it in hints and glances and share it in this communion, this fellowship, and and it's after experience, again, with the scientific, not a priori, but ex postori, where after experience, we learn, and we've encountered you, Linda, in such a way that, it isn't possible unless we can actually just enjoy a dialogue and fellowship. And I thank you for that. I thank you, Marty, for bringing this subject matter to the front. And that's the blessing of us as being created in Christ, that this uniqueness that we have, that always inspires me so much, because until you talk, where you speak for yourself and you testify who God is and what he's done for you, all of a sudden you can see the glory. You can't see it and you're just looking at, you have to hear it. John McKenna, you always used to tell me, he said, stop looking with your eyes, start looking with your ears. Because you can't, faith comes by in hearing the word of God. And as Jesus speaks to you in his uniqueness and his particularity to speak to you, and hearing that word is a life-giving word that only you can hear. Just like, they heard the voice of the Lord speaking, "This is my beloved son, whom will I please." Listen to him. Everybody else heard thunder and lightning. And when we can hear the word of God and the voice of God, that's the greatest gift you can have, because that's the creative power. It's the living word that speaks. He speaks life, and he speaks life to us, and we can testify that we don't have all the experience yet, but we know that the road that we're on and the direction that we're going, it's well worth the journey, no matter what it costs us, because it already cost them everything. We just have to follow along and get the benefit of it.
Yeah,
Amen. Amen and amen.
absolutely.
Well, Linda, we have started to dive into your book, but it's been a joy to dive into your life that gives, kind of resonance to all that you write here. And there's, every story is a wonderful journey into your life for one, but also just to give insight, vignettes into what it is that you are learning about life in Christ, and to share in this life. And your integration of scripture is also wonderful. The prayer at the end, I think, is again just a wonderful piece. Something I have learned to do myself is to write prayers from the Abba. So you might think about, I like your prayers, but help people to hear the voice of the Abba, or the voice of Jesus, or the voice of the Spirit. I think that there would be much that would show up there too, just to keep the dynamic of the realism of the one who speaks to us as present as well.
That is a good thought I hadn't considered, Marty, is and I've been trying to do more of that as I continue writing my blogs, is to introduce the spiritual disciplines in the sense of listening, hearing, silence, being present with God, because I feel like that's so important for people to learn that you can do that. You can hear from God. You can have him there. He is there. This is how you experience him, and so on. So
I like to begin John 1. In the beginning was the Word, but change the word to voice. In the beginning was the voice.
yeah,
The voice was with God, and the voice was God. And the voice became present, or flesh, and spoke among us. And I think that's what people really yearn for today, is to not just hear us talk about that Jesus has done these things, but to hear the voice of Jesus, and to hear the voice of the Father,
yeah,
and the voice of the Spirit. Then, and I've had people say, wow, it finally feels personal. We're not just talking about God. God is actually showing up here. This matters.
yeah.
So anyway, thank you for your book. Thank you for being with us today. We will always make room for you here, and I
Thank
hope you keep writing, and we have you back more. Did anyone else have any final questions or comments for Linda? I see there's a new message. I have to go down there. Bill said, thank you for your work, Linda. That's
Thank you.
good.
I appreciate
And I
it.
just hope that we'll get more women. I hope that if you find women along the way, even, I mean, they don't have to have done everything, but people who really can bring what it is that you are encouraging, or if you want to bring someone on with you, I think it would be great to create space for that as well. So just be thinking about how you can help make room
Okay.
for other people
All right.
to be part of this conversation, and to help us to learn, because I think we have so many blind spots. And so I just appreciate what it is that you bring of helping us to see those.
Well, thank you very much. It's been an inspiration to me to have this conversation, because too much of what I do is off on a side note instead of in conversation with others, and I'm trying to make a change in that. So
Right. Well, just for you to know, I love to encourage people into their gifts. And so if you want to have any conversations about, things that I could help clarify or encourage you in those, let me know, and I'd be happy to bring that to you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you to all of you.
Very good. We've got a big long one from Todd here. Off topic afterwards. Oh, that's off topic afterwards, with a conversation on dis-ease. Good. Well, I guess we will sign off today. And who do we have next week? I always forget to look here and see. Next week is June. Up next week, we're doing Hidden Treasures with T.F. Torrance and his introduction to William Manson's Jesus and the Christian, and I will also include some of the text. This takes a little bit off of the work that we got from Darren a few weeks ago. So we're going to look at what TF says in that book, and also what William Manson did in some of his foundational thoughts in beginning that book on Jesus and the Christian. So that's what we'll do next week. I will have just come back from Princeton at the Carl Barth conference, and a good time will be had by all. So blessings on you all. Have a wonderful day.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Mark. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.